This text in Ephesians chapter 6, 1 through 4, is a little shorter than the other ones, and it's actually a little bit easier or simpler to analyze. There's a lot of implications here, but we're just trying to help think through how to analyze a text of Scripture. So the first thing I want to do is find our subjects and verbs. In the very first section, we can see the first subject is children, and the first verb is obey, and that's an imperative or a command. The object of obedience is your parents. The second verb is honor, or second imperative is honor. And, of course, the same subject for that is children. Object, father, mother. Of course, that's the same as parents here, and so you see the connection in this section. So this whole section is one idea, 1 through 3. Children is the subject. The verbs are obey and honor. The objects are father and mother. Second section, of course, is this section on the fathers, where the fathers is the subject. 2 imperatives or 2 commands. Do not provoke them, children, but bring them up. And that's the second verb and second imperative in this. Now, if we're to just kind of take each of these separately, we have a couple of key words that helps us work through a little bit of what we are talking about when we think about analyzing a text. First, we found our main idea, right? We found children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. And then the second idea is really not a separate thing, but a continuation of this very same concept of obedience. Obey and honor are very similar ideas. What you actually have is you have the main idea here, and then what you have is you have the apostle explaining or expanding on that idea. So you have an idea and an explanation or expansion. This prepositional phrase, in the Lord, gives us, when we think about this first action here, we have an action with children, obey your parents. The in the Lord gives us the manner of this action. How do you obey? In the Lord. Manner is answering the question, how? Whenever you see the word for, that also is helpful. So for is almost always because, for this reason, and that usually is a ground or the reason for obedience. Children, obey your parents. Why? If manner is how, ground is why. Why? For this is right. So you have a action, children, obey your parents. You have the ground, for this is right, and you have the manner, in the Lord. Come to the second part of this, the explanation or the expansion of that. You have the second verbal idea, second imperative idea, honor your father and mother. This little section right here is very interesting. This is this whole verses 2 and 3 is a quote from the Septuagint of Exodus chapter 20, the 10 Commandments, verse 12. It's the first commandment on the second half of the 10 Commandments. It's dealing with the family. Paul adds this little commentary. This is not found in Exodus. This is a commentary on this idea of promise. And I think he's doing this for a really particular reason that we'll come back to in a minute. But let's focus on this word, because this is also a really important word when we find it, that. So when you see the word that, it's almost always going to be either action or result. It's usually, can be inference, but usually action or result. So once again, our action right here is honor your father and mother. Is this purpose or result? It really doesn't matter, but I do believe it's probably best understood as result because it's promising something that will or may happen. It's not saying why it's going to happen, but what will happen. And so that's a result of honoring your father and mother is the receiving of a promise of a good life. We could discuss and debate, and it'd be fun to do, about what it means to live long on the earth and all that, but that's not the point of this video. I do believe it's simply the proverbial idea of the good life, both now and forever. Moving to the second section, we have the subject of the fathers and the imperatives of do not provoke and bring them up. And we have this fun example here where we have one of these times when we have the two parts to it, where the first one is negative, do not provoke your children. And then you have a converse of that, something positive, but bring them up or nourish them, literally. So when you see a negative and a positive, whatever order they're in the Scripture, the primary command is the positive. The idea is don't do the negative so that you can do the positive. Or another way to put that, do the positive and the negative won't happen. So you could actually say, the reason why you should bring your children up is so that you won't provoke them toward wrath. So you won't anger them with being left alone and not raised. Two phrases that go along with this action of bring them up is in the training or in the admonition. And this is very similar to what we saw up here in the Lord. I think it's very obvious, of the Lord, in the Lord. There's common parallelism there. In the training, in the admonition, training literally means discipline. The time it's used often is Hebrews 12, which talks about the discipline of God. Admonition is warning or instruction. And so what he's telling the fathers, or the parents, but the fathers is the lead, is that when you bring them up, I want you to do this, nourish them, bring them up in this sphere. Or, just like before within the Lord, this manner. So the action and the manner in the training, in the admonition of the Lord. Well, and that's the analysis of this text. Try that a couple times and see if you don't come up with the same solutions I did, or if you come up with something else, that'd be fine too. Just wrestle with the text, brothers.